Okay, so we are going to use what we're going to call the primary trig ratios, which we'll talk about in a second. So we're going to do all the side lengths, which you can do using Pythagorean theorem, but we are going to sometimes be given angles, sometimes be given sides, so we need another way because the Pythagorean theorem only deals with side lengths. Then you're going to solve word problems. Then eventually, so this will be next, sine law and cosine law and word problems are used for triangles that don't have a right angle. So when you see a picture in a book or on a test, they are not to scale. So if a picture does not have the right angle symbol in it, then you can't just assume the triangle is right anymore. In grade 9, that's all you did, okay? So we're going to look in the first part to this on how to label a triangle. That's going to be important. So we are looking for always triangles, okay? The relationship between angles and the sides. And like I said, we're going to do right angle triangles first and then not right angle triangles. So you need a scientific calculator. So you need to look on your calculator. Does it have buttons that say, it looks like sin, S-I-N, that's sine. It looks like cos, C-O-S, okay, those ones. Yes, you can use an iPhone for sure. I think Samsung is the same, where you turn it sideways. I'm going to call that unfriendly, okay? Yes, it's possible to use it, but I don't recommend that. If you have a calculator, it is going to be very, 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 very important, and you've probably never cared about this before, but in the top, it has to be in degree mode. If it says rad or grad, that is going to give you the wrong answer. So some calculators will say DEG, and some of them just say D, okay? So you need to know how to get your calculator into degree or D. Does anybody have a calculator right now that says rad, grad? Okay. You're good. That's not good. I'm going to show you what to do. Okay, so see how it says DRG? So do second function, and then keep pushing that until it says, oh, push the arrow. There you go. I can switch this for you. Just push the arrow. There you go. Done. That's fine. Good. Yep. DRG, DEG, D. Anybody else have grad or rad? Perfect. So when you go to do these questions, take a look, because usually it's really actually, to be honest, easy to switch between them. And eventually, when you get to grade 12, you're going to want to switch to rad, okay? So it's not, if your calculator does that, don't throw it out and think, I don't want this calculator. Yes, you do. But for grade 10, we just want it to be in degrees, okay? That's important. So make sure you have that. Okay, so we're going to start with right angle triangles. So the big thing is the right angle has to be labeled. Like I said, these pictures are not going to be to scale. You can't just look at it and be like, oh, you know what? I think it's a right angle. No, it has to have this, okay? It has to have that showing it's a right angle triangle. And we have to label the triangle. Sometimes you even have to draw a triangle and label it with letters. Maybe we'll talk about that later. We'll just focus on the three sides. The hypotenuse you should be used to. So it's the longest side or the side opposite to the 90-degree sign in the triangle. And triangles can be drawn different ways, right? So it doesn't have to be like this side and this side here and the hypotenuse like this. You could draw it the flipped. You could draw it like upside down with the hypotenuse at the bottom. It's the longest side in the triangle or the side opposite the 90-degree. So the hypotenuse is easy to label. We're going to use the short form hype. We are also going to need to label the opposite side and the adjacent side. So most people are good with opposite. Opposite means like a cross. Adjacent it means like next to, okay? So we're going to use hyp, op, and adjacent. So when you have an opposite side and adjacent side, they are not the same for angle A and angle C. They're going to be different. So on the next slide, we'll label both of those. So now when you have angle B, this side here is opposite, and the side next to it we call adjacent. Whereas angle A, this side is opposite, and that side is adjacent. And that is going to influence what our primary trig ratios are. So when you have a question, read what it says, find the measure of angle A, then I would go in and label what's opposite and what's adjacent, and the hypotenuse is always across from the right angle. At least when you're first starting this. Okay. So what are the primary trig ratios? So now that we want to include the angles, not just doing the side lengths like Pythagorean theorem, then we're going to use the primary trig ratios, they're called. So in grade 9, all we did was sine lengths. So logically, the next thing is to include what's the angle, measure of the angle. So we're going to use the symbol theta to represent any angle, okay? So sometimes the question will have the angles labeled on the triangle ABCD, EFG, whatever. You can label them any letters. Sometimes the triangle will have a little theta sign in it. So here it's sort of italicized. That doesn't really matter. It's just like a circle with a line in the middle, okay? It's called theta. So there are three angles. There's 3 trig ratios. So sine technically should have an E, but we use a short form, okay? So sine theta is the opposite side length over hypotenuse. Cosine, which we abbreviate to cos, is adjacent over hypotenuse. And tangent, which we shorten to tan, is opposite side over adjacent. So you can see that labeling opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse is an important first step, okay? So when they're written over top like that, that literally means divide, okay? So opposite side length divided by hypotenuse, adjacent divided by hypotenuse, opposite divided by adjacent. So what it is, it's sort of like you're trying to fill in the formula. So if you know the opposite side length and the hypotenuse side length, then you're going to choose sine. If you know adjacent and hypotenuse, you're going to pick cos. If you know opposite and adjacent and not hypotenuse, then you would choose tan. So depending on what information you're given and what information you're looking for, you need to pick the appropriate trig ratio. And you might have heard people talk about this, SOHCAHTOA. If you like abbreviations to try to remember this, then you can do that, because it's sine is opposite over hypotenuse, cos adjacent over hypotenuse, tan opposite over adjacent. You're going to be given both on the test and the exam, or the quest or whatever, in the exam, you'll be given these, okay? However, you have to be able to label the triangle and decide which one you need to use, okay? Do I have side length, or do I have opposite side length? Do I have hypotenuse? Do I have adjacent? What am I looking for? Okay? So I know there are quite a few questions listed in there, because this itself is not too tricky. However, you just need to make sure that you're good at choosing which one goes where. Okay? Which formula do I want to use? And because you have not used sine, cos, and tan buttons on your calculator before, it's good to get to know your calculator. Some of you, I can see, you have what I'm going to call unfriendly calculators, where you're going to have to go backwards and push the number and then the sine button. And some of you have friendly calculators where it's got a display and it will go in order. Okay, so you really have to get to know your calculator because that can be very frustrating. Okay? All right, so let's practice. So what I want you to do is type in sine 50. So figure it out. Do you do sine 50 or 50 sine? Okay, you should get this number. And there are special triangles, which again is a grade 11 thing. But for the most part, you're going to get a huge repeating decimal. Is there anybody who did not get that number with their calculator? I'll come show you how to use it. Okay, so whether you go forwards or backwards, figure it out. Usually, the question is going to ask you to round. So it often will say round to 4 decimal places. For when we do an angle, it'll often say round to the nearest whole number. Again, it sort of depends how picky your teacher is. Sometimes that kind of whether you're going to leave your answer as a fraction or whatever, that stuff will fall under communication, like do you have proper form or whatever. Okay, so let's do sine 36. So it's up to you. When you're asked to give a final answer rounded to 4 decimal places, if you want to write down what your calculator says first, that's fine. But make sure you have the final answer, okay? So technically, this sine 36 is 0.587785252. Okay, so we're going to do 4 decimal places. Okay, so you have to round up because it's 77. Sine 40. Same thing. You have to round up. Yes, because it's usually 4 for side lengths or in a question like this. So whatever it says in the question, make sure that you round to the appropriate number of decimal places. If you're the kind of person who wants to write out whatever your calculator says as long as the display is first and then round, that's totally fine. Okay, just make sure your final answer is rounded to the correct number. So there will be questions like this where you just have to straight up use your calculator. So easy, okay, 1 mark stuff. And then you can also have to find side lengths. We'll do side lengths first for a triangle, okay? So it says, step 1, label your triangle relative to the angle. So in this case, we are given 51. Now, could we figure out what the third angle is? Yes, you could, for sure. This means 90. You do 180 minus 90 minus 51. That totally is fine. But you don't have to, right? So it's up to you how much work you want to do, I guess. But I do recommend that you label what these sides are. So 30 centimeters to 51, is it opposite, adjacent, or hypotenuse? Adjacent. Beside it, the opposite side, nope. This is the hypotenuse. In this question, determine the value of x. It says 1 decimal place. Okay, so make sure you read that. Do I even care what the hypotenuse is? No. Okay, so unlike grade 9 where you had to have all 3 side lengths, you don't this time. So now we are looking for looking for opposite, that's our x, and we have adjacent. So opposite and adjacent, what ratio am I going to use? Kylie. Opposite and adjacent. Tan, yay. Now, the good news is, again, you're going to get those ratios. It's going to say sine theta opposite over hypotenuse. Okay, it'll tell you those. Yes. Yes. Show all your work. Say that again. Yes. Yes. Okay, so this is the easier way to find side length because the x is in the top. So how do I isolate it? What do I have to do over here? Yes. Good. Multiply by 30. They cancel, or 30 divided by 30 is 1. You have to do that over here. So now, again, this is where you need to have a good relationship with your calculator. Sleep with it under your pillow. Take it out for dinner. When your brother or sister comes and says, "Can I borrow your calculator?" you say, "Miss Todd says no." You need to know how this works in your calculator because you can certainly do 30 times tan 51, push equals, and it should go fine if you have a nice calculator. Now, sometimes students don't like this because now it's like letters, is it algebra? But this, if you type tan 51 in your calculator, all it's going to do is give you a number, okay? So you can certainly do that. It's going to be a huge number. We only want one decimal place, so you can definitely round it. But if you want to keep as many decimal places as you want to, then in your head, try to start thinking of this like a number. If you do 30 times tan 51, you don't need brackets, you don't need anything. Your calculator should take care of it, okay? So let's see, try it out. See what you want to do. Do you want to type in tan 51 first and push equals and then times 30? Are you just going to do 30 times tan 51? Decide what you want to do. Yes. Yes, 1, because it says 1 this time. So just read the question. Yes. Yes. You can pick. It's even better. Nope. It'll change the ratio. You probably won't do tan. I guess you would, yes. Yep. 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 That's it. Yep. It doesn't matter. If you write the x on this side because it is on this side, that's fine. If you write the x on this side, it doesn't matter. We're multiplying. You should put the 0.0. It says 1 decimal place, okay? It also, when? To 1 decimal place. So, good. Depending on the teacher, you might lose communication marks, okay? Because you didn't follow correct form. Yeah, but you didn't follow correct form. It does matter. Eventually, it's going to say sometimes exact form, and you have to leave it as a fraction. So really start to develop these skills, okay? Also, what else am I missing? Nope. My work's neat enough. Yes. Good. If it says a unit, then your answer has to have units. Sometimes it doesn't, so you won't have to, okay? Philip said a therefore statement. It's up to you. If this is nice, if I can follow what you've done, you don't need a therefore. If you are one of those people who kind of, is all over the place and you're not sure that I'm going to be able to tell your answer, then just have a statement. It takes 10 seconds, right? Okay, so let's see. Did we label? Yes. Did we determine which trig ratio to use? Yes. Did we solve the equation? Yes. Yes. Depending on what you're given and what you have. So that's why labeling opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse is important. So for 51, I knew I wanted opposite. I knew I had the adjacent side, so that's tan. If the 30 was over here and you were doing opposite and hypotenuse, you would use sine. So just label opposite, adjacent, hypotenuse every time, and then pick what you want and what you have. Okay? When we do the word problem 1, there'll be questions that say solve the whole triangle. So then you do have a little bit more variety. You can even use the Pythagorean theorem once you have the other two side lengths, but maybe you find this a little bit easier. Okay, so we're going to do one now where this time, what is x? What side is this? Yes. Good. So the hypotenuse is in the bottom of the fraction, and that requires a little bit more brain power, okay? So, but let's label, so here we're going to use 42. So what side is this over here? Good. Adjacent, we don't care about. So we have an angle, we have opposite, we have hypotenuse. So that's so we're going to use sine. Okay, so now the x is in the bottom. So this is going to require just an extra step. So even though this is an x, you can still get it out of the bottom or do the inverse operation. You can still multiply. And now it's no longer in the bottom. However, we have one extra step. So sometimes this is where the fact that this says sine 42, students don't like that. So it's up to you. Sine 42 is a number, or you can just leave it like this. Like if you like it to be as exact as possible, you don't want to write down numbers, then leave it as sine 42. So now we're multiplying, so we're going to divide. Actually, I'm just going to rewrite this. Okay, so now we're going to divide by sine 42. But if you don't like that, if you would rather make sine 42 a number, then do that. No big deal. Okay, sine 42 is a number, so then you can just do that too. You should get the same answer. Okay, so if you are, again, the kind of person like this, I haven't even typed in my calculator yet, whereas here I've done it, now I'm going to have to do it again because your calculator will handle this. You can do 4.5 divided by sine 42, push equals, and you'll get your answer, okay? So this requires less calculator work. This, you have to round, you have to use your calculator, which is fine, okay? Just go make sure that you understand the steps you're doing and don't skip steps and stuff like that, okay? So now I'm going to do 4.5 divided by sine 42. I'm going to check. One decimal place, what the question says. And you get the same thing. Yes. because the x is in the bottom. So we have to multiply the x first to get it out of the bottom, but then it's still not isolated over here, so then we have to divide. So if this bugs you, if you don't like this, then what I would do is this. Type sine 42 into your calculator and make it a number. You're always, when you're trying to isolate x. So when you isolate x, like in grade 9, you always have to do the opposite operation, right? So here, x is in the bottom, or dividing. So what's the opposite to that, or inverse? So you multiply. But then it's still not by itself. So now here you're multiplying. What's the inverse of that? Divide. And then it's going to be by itself. So whenever you're finding hypotenuse or the x is in the bottom, it's always going to require an extra step. Okay? And if you don't like this, like if you don't like there's like numbers in both, then just type this into your calculator and make it a number. You can do that. That's no problem. You can also sort of think about, does my answer make sense? Okay? So first of all, it's the hypotenuse. That should be the longest side. So yes, we only have one side, but you can check, is 6.7 longer than 4.5? Yes, it is. If you have a triangle that's got a side that's 4.5, then the longer side shouldn't be astronomically larger, okay? We try to make practical questions. So this wouldn't be 4.5 and the hypotenuse wouldn't be, 100, okay? So you can kind of check that you've got a logical answer, okay? All right, now what happens if you are going to have to find the angle? So again, this is something that you have not considered or done with your calculator. So these examples here they're already done for us, just showing us what to do. So what I want you to do is look at your calculator, and like I was just talking about, the inverse operation to solve for x can be dividing when you're multiplying or multiplying when you're dividing, which is something you guys did in grade 9. Now we're going to consider what the inverse of sine, cos, and tan are. So if you look at your calculator, you can see the sine, cos, and tan button, and then it might be second function or shift, and then above it, it says sine -1, and then above the cos, cos -1, tan -1. We usually call that tan inverse. We don't say tan -1, sine -1. Not that you can't, but we call this tan inverse, sine inverse, cos inverse. And you shouldn't have to find it. It should be right above the sine, cos, and tan button, okay? I think all calculators, whether it's unfriendly or not, they're all like that. So here now it says tan theta equals 0.3711. We want to find the angle. Again, often to one decimal place, sometimes to the nearest whole number, depending on the question. So if you choose to write it what your display on your calculator says, that's fine. Just make sure your final answer is one decimal place. So if you want to practice, so you have to do shift tan or second function tan 0.3711, and then you'll get the answer. And you need to be really careful, because what you're going to learn about in grade 11 is that sometimes your calculator is good, and sometimes depending on where you are in like a Cartesian grid, then negatives and positives can sort of mess things up, okay? You're going to learn something called the cast rule and stuff like that. So you want to make sure before you do these questions, clear your calculator out so you haven't accidentally pressed the negative sign or something like that, okay? So you can do it where you've got the number, or again, if you're the kind of student who likes to keep as many decimal places as possible, you want to do the smallest amount of calculator rounding, then you can actually put the ratio in your calculator. So you can do cos inverse, for example, and then some calculators will put brackets and some don't. So if your calculator, let's try this one. Push cos inverse. Do brackets show up? Then you're good. Then you can do 9.1 divided by 17.4, close the bracket, and you're done. If you don't get brackets automatically, then you have to put them in, okay? So cos inverse, bracket, 9.1 divided by 17.4, bracket. Or what your calculator will do is cos inverse of 9.1 and then divide by 17.4. So you want the calculator to do the division first. Now, also, many of you might actually have an answer button. So you can actually do 9.1 divided by 17.4, push equals, then do cos inverse and push answer, and it saves the answer for you if you don't clear it out. But that's like a shortcut that you don't need to use, but maybe moving forward, especially if you're going to take science, we use a calculator in chemistry and physics, maybe you'll be looking to make shortcuts in your calculator, but that doesn't matter. Just get to know your calculator, whether it's going to make brackets or not. Is there anybody who wants me to come and show them how to do that? Figure it out? Okay. So again, I recommend that you use the same calculator so that you know its little tricks, okay? No, and thank you. It is not multiply. And so if you do tan inverse times and you push the times button, your calculator will probably say error, okay? So it's just tan inverse and then the number. That's how we get an angle. Again, you can think of the logic of your answer. We're talking about if we already have 90 degrees in one of the angles and the other two angles have to be in the triangle and they have to all add up to 180, then you can't have an angle above 90, okay? So that's, again, something your calculator often doesn't know the situation. It's just like a computer, right? So in grade 11, that's where you'll have to think about, what kind of angle is it? And you'll learn something called the cast rule. So we're really, like I said, just kind of scratching the surface here. Okay? So if you want, this is in words, again, what we're doing. So mathematically, we're doing the inverse operation. So what you do to both sides. So if we're solving, if this is multiplying, then you have to divide on both sides. So if you want to solve for theta, you do the inverse operation, and then you get your answer. So we'll do one more, and then we'll do a triangle. Sine inverse, 0.667. And if you look on the next page, we're going to do cos and tan. We're going to find the angles using cos and tan, and you don't get the same answer. So again, when we do these angle questions, the first step is going to be labeling opposite, adjacent, hypotenuse, and then deciding, are we going to use sine, are we going to use cos, or are we going to use tan? Because you're not going to get the same answer. Okay, so choosing the correct trig ratio is also important. Okay, so we're going to do, just to make sure that's reiterated, that you have to pick the right ratio. Okay, so choosing the appropriate ratio is also important. Okay, so let's do some examples. So we're going to find theta to 1 decimal place. So sometimes they'll label the angle as theta. Sometimes they'll label it as a letter. So we'll do examples of both, okay? So it doesn't really matter. And so now if we want theta, we have two sides here. So we're going to label what they are. So 13 across from the right angle is the hypotenuse. This side is opposite to theta. And this time we don't have a choice, right? We don't know what theta is, so we can't find the other angle. So we have to use, there's only one option here. Unlike the other questions where, yes, you technically could have, it was 51, you could have found what the other angle was, but you don't need to do that if it doesn't say to solve the whole triangle. So, I mean, that's fine. You can always do more work. That's totally fine. Just make sure that you're at least answering the question you're asked, okay? So again, we're going to do 1 decimal place. So opposite and hypotenuse, what ratio is that? Sine. So again, if you like acronyms, sine, opposite hypotenuse, cos is adjacent hypotenuse, TOA is opposite, tan is opposite and adjacent. The units, so to speak, for angles are degrees. So you can leave out the centimeters if you want. So now it's decision time. Do you want to do 5 divided by 13 and make that a number? Do you have a relationship with your calculator that you know whether it needs brackets or not? So I'll do 2. I'll show you both ways, okay? And it really doesn't matter. I don't care. It's not like I'm like, ugh, they did the division first. I don't judge. I don't care what you do. Whatever makes you successful, okay? You get the same answer. Please don't feel like you need to choose one way right now. You can switch between them. You can do whatever you want. You just really need to know how your calculator works. Does it make brackets? Should I do the division first? Can I even use the shortcut answer button? Choose one. Yep. I mean, if you have time and you're like, you know what, I'm going to check my answer and you do both, you could do that, but you don't need to do both. Okay, so Now we're going to do the bottom corner theta. So this time we've got the hypotenuse and this one, which is adjacent, beside it, next to it. So when you have adjacent hypotenuse, yes, cos. So ca, if you like the acronym. When, let's say you get to a question like the last example we're going to do, and you have to label and draw your own triangle, then the fact that the bottom is always bigger is true, right? The hypotenuse should be the longest side. So again, there are things that you can remember about this that will help you sort of check, did I logically do the right thing, okay? So I'll do the same thing. I'll split it apart to show you both ways, and then you decide what you want to do, okay? Yep. If you like less, like doing it this way is less button pushing too, so. This one is weird because it's 62.967, so that means you have to round up, but to round up from 0.9 means you have to include the 0.0, okay? So just make sure if you have when you have a teacher or there's communication marks and stuff like that, you want to make sure you have the right form, okay? In this question, I apologize. I don't know why those are circled. Okay, that's just a typo. I don't know why it's like that. So this one now, we don't have the hypotenuse. We have, this is the theta, so this is adjacent. This is opposite. Okay, so we're going to do tan. Ta, yep, that's right. It is. Toa, I mean. Thank you. So again, the more questions you do of this, the more you'll get used to these ratios. So for example, this is going to give us a number above 1. That will only happen with tan. All the other ones will be like 0 point something. So you can sort of get used to the little tricks to these trig questions as well. Because like I said, next year we're going to amp it up a bit and talk about like when is it positive, when is it negative, how to figure out the angle differently and stuff like that. here. It doesn't really matter. Some people like to keep a few and then round at the end. It doesn't matter. Because you're in rad. So see this DRG? Make sure it's DRG. Yep. One more time. There you go. Yeah. So if you are trying to sort of get rid of the tan, then you have to do tan inverse. So look at the button tan. See how above it says tan inverse? So then it's orange. So you have to do second function, tan. Do you want to leave this in or to make this a number? Actually, now we've done this. Use brackets. Do 6.8 divided by 4.5 bracket equals. That's it. Okay, so that was good that just happened. So let's say you get the wrong answer in the back of the book. You look at your friend's work. It looks like they have the same numbers as you. Why did you get the wrong answer? It has to be in degrees. If it says grad or rad, you're going to get the wrong answer. Okay, so if your numbers all look good, check what the mode your calculator's in first. Okay? Okay, so this last one now, we have to sketch the triangle. And this time it says angle B is 90 degrees. So this question, you have to draw your own triangle. So when you first do the primary trig ratio homework, most of these questions, if not all of them, will be labeled fine. But what we're going to do next after lunch is word problems, right? So then you have to sometimes draw your own triangle and label it. So that's important to do too. It does not need to be to scale. You do not need to use a ruler. Just draw a right angle triangle. It's telling you that B is 90. Okay, it says B is 90. Without putting the numbers in, then it doesn't matter how you draw this. We go in alphabetical order. Don't go B, S, R. Okay? We're going to do like A, B, C. Oh, it says A, B, C, but it's always alphabetical order. We use capital letters for the angles. So then it says cos A is 5/9. So you have to think about what cos is. It's ka. So the hypotenuse is fine. That's the easy one. Do that one first. That should be here. It doesn't give us units, so we can just put 9. But now you need to decide which side should be adjacent. So we're doing angle A. So if you want, put a theta in here, or you could even like do this if you want to focus your attention on angle A. If you drew your triangle without looking at mine and you put your A down here, that's totally fine. Just make sure then you adjust where you label the adjacent side. So now we want to do the adjacent. So down here, this is opposite, right? We're looking for the side next to angle A, adjacent. It doesn't ask us to do anything else. but you could solve for angle A, you could solve for angle C, you could use this information to solve for the opposite side, BC. So if it says to solve the triangle, and I forget what it says in this new textbook. This solving the whole triangle might be in the word problem homework later, but if you're asked to solve the triangle, what I want you to do is all the sides and all the angles, okay? So just read the question carefully. But you have, this is so easy-ish, or it seems easy, it seems straightforward, but again, you really have to get to know what your calculator is like, okay? So please, I'll put the D12, but it's on here as well, what the homework is. Oh, right here, okay?